Good morning, everyone. Well, we're pleased to have a continuation of our initial webinar on avian influenza global update and Iowa's preparedness. With us today, we have Dr. Fidelis Hegngi from USDA APHIS to provide the update. I would also suggest that you may want to refer to the PowerPoint presentations on the Iowa Poultry Association website for the presentations given earlier by Dr. David Schmidt of Iowa Department of Ag and Land Stewardship, and also Dr. Yuko Sato from Iowa State University. So anyway, Dr. Hegngi, we're thrilled to have you with us today and appreciate you sharing an update with our membership.
Thank you, Kevin. Again, I'd like to thank Sarah Bowman, Kevin Stiles, and Emily Reynolds with the Iowa Poultry Association for planning this webinar. Like you said, the topic that I'm going to be presenting today is the global avian influenza update. In this presentation, I will basically try to cover what the OIE has put forward as a situational update. Again, the word OIE, for some of you who would not know exactly what that acronym means, the original acronym was initiated in 1924, is Office International de Epizootis. 28 member countries kind of formed the OIE in 1924. By 2003, that acronym was changed to the World Organization for Animal Health. Why the OIE? The need to fight animal disease at global level led to the formation of the OIE. Today, the United States is a member. There are 181 member countries. The OIE is an intergovernmental organization responsible for the improvement of animal health worldwide. It is not an organization under the United Nations. So what they put forth for all member countries is not a regulation, it's specific guidelines for country members to use in terms of negotiating with each other how they trade for animal and animal products. To help with the presentation today, looking at the outline, in discussing the current global situation, we will try to answer some specific questions. The first one is the current hypopathogenic avian influenza situation exceptional, and why? What are the differences and similarities with the global epidemics which occurred in 2005 to 2012 as compared to the one that is ongoing? We will look at the geographical characteristics of countries and domestic birds that are affected, the impact of hypopathogenic avian influenza in domestic birds, the evolution of hypopathogenic avian influenza in domestic birds, and we'll describe a little bit, looking at 2018, the few countries that have found hypopathogenic avian influenza in their wild bird population. We will then try to understand the current global situation, looking at specific subtypes that have been circulating for a while, the H7N9, the H5N1, the H5N8, the H5N6, the H5N2, and the H7N4. That is a new serotype that has recently been identified. To begin, we all know that the epidemiology of avian influenza is extremely complex, extremely complex. I have a colleague who always, when we discuss about avian influenza, we always say it's a disease that has two flavors. The low fat is kind of mild. Sometimes you don't see any clinical signs. And then The hyper is the one that is extremely devastating, where you can see up to 100% mortality. The virus constantly evolves, and the behavior of each new serotypes, and when you look at the strains within the serotypes, they keep evolving all the time. And it can vary based on the response in different countries. So when we look at the epidemiology of the disease in the past 13 years, we can characterize the fact that there have been two main global panzootics. The first one started in 2004. It kind of peaked in 2006. And afterwards, the virus actively progressively decreased up to 2012. Then the second panzootic started in 2013. And the maximal activity kind of went up in 2015. And that is ongoing till today, or the year 2018. So the objective of this report is to provide an historical background of hyperpathogenic avian influenza epidemiology since 2005, so that we can provide a context to the current situation and consider what might happen next. So when we look at the slide that is in front of you, just looking at what are the differences and similarities with the global epidemics which occurred in 2005 through 2012, and then 2013 through 2018, we can see that for the past 5 years, it has been considered truly exceptional for basically three reasons. The number of countries and territories affected with hyper in domestic birds, the number of outbreaks reported in domestic birds, and the number of subtypes reported in domestic birds. So if you look at in 2005 to 2012, we had about 65 number of countries affected, and in 2013 through 2018, January, it's about 68. The most significant difference is the number of subtypes reported in domestic birds. Between 2005 and 2012, that was 4, and between 2013 and 2018, that was 12. So that is almost 3 times the number of subtypes reported in domestic birds as compared between 2005 and 2012, and 2013 and 2018. By January of this year, we can see that 8 countries and territories were still affected. And those 8 countries have been Afghanistan, Cambodia, Chinese Taipei, Iraq, Japan, Republic of Korea, Saudi Arabia, and South Africa. When I woke up this morning, I kind of checked the website, and I think Pakistan, has been included. And the serotype there has been an H5N8. Looking at the map in front of you, another characteristics of the countries with domestic birds affected is that we've had 68 countries that have been affected with these serotypes. When we look at it critically, we can see that all regions have been affected, and the countries in those regions, there are almost 5 regions, and the countries in those regions have been affected at least once. The most affected regions have been Europe, Asia, several countries in Africa, while in the Americas, the disease was present in the north part of the region and almost absent in the middle part of the region, central part, and the southern part of the Americas. When we continue again to look at the geographical characteristics of countries with domestic birds affected, we can see that there have been 12 different avian influenza A subtypes that have been reported during the period of 2013 and 2017. Europe reported the highest virus diversity of 7 subtypes, followed by Asia and the Americas with 6 subtypes, Africa with 3 subtypes, and the Oceania with 1 subtype. The subtypes H5N1, H5N2, and H5N8 with the most geographically widespread and common reported in 4 out of the 5 regions. When we continue to look again at the geographical characteristics, looking at since January 2018, Asia still remains the region that is significantly affected. And we can see that there are 4 different subtypes that are circulating in Asia: H5N1, H5N2, H5N6, and H5N8. The poultry destroyed so far in those outbreaks has been almost 1,800,000 birds. If you look at the impact of highly pathogenic avian influenza in those regions again, and the losses of birds in terms of deaths and animals destroyed, we can see that Asia represents the highest number of birds destroyed, almost 67 million. When I look at this data, I think the Americas, this number doesn't show quite correct for me, because if you realize we, the United States, experienced the largest disease outbreak in 2014 and 2015, of which we depopulated almost 50 million birds. So I don't see why this was not included in this data by the OIE. But we could see that Asia is a significant region, followed by the Americas, and then Europe. So if we look at, again, Asia being the country with the most impact, as it continues to 2018, there are almost 565,000 birds destroyed so far in January 2018. When we look at the evolution of the pathogenic avian influenza in domestic birds, and you look at some of the epi curves on the presentation in front of you, we could see that there were several peaks in 2006, in 2008, in 2015. So you can see the peak in 2015. A lot of that came from the United States. And then you could see another peak in 2017. So in 2017, we had about 1,830 outbreaks. Going back to 2015, we had about 2,454 outbreaks. In 2008, we had about 1,954 outbreaks. And in 2006, we had about 1,841 outbreaks. Looking at another epidemic curve from January 2013 to January 2018, we could see where we still see the peak in 2015, and then 2016 was kind of quiet. Then again in 2017, we saw about 1,243 outbreaks as compared to 1,828 outbreaks in 2015. So you see, the outbreaks have been decreasing since 2015. And this next slide in front of you kind of depicts that. So when we look at it, there is a decrease. Looking at outbreaks, moving again, looking at 2017 and 2018. In looking at this year in January 2018, where the virus has been circulating, we could see that there are 3 countries that have reported high pathogenic avian influenza in wild birds. That is Germany, Japan, and the United Kingdom. And the viruses responsible for these outbreaks all were subtyped as an H5N6. So let's move forward in understanding the current global situation, looking at the different serotypes. If you all remember, the H7N9 kind of was first detected in poultry in China in 2013, and it continues to circulate. When it was first detected in China, it was a low pathogenic H7N9, and all of a sudden, by 2017, that virus had mutated to become a highly pathogenic avian influenza. The interesting thing about this serotype is that it was causing a lot of sporadic human infections, posing a lot of public health concerns, but it was not killing birds. So as of March 28, there has been 1,625 human infections with 622 deaths. When we move and continue to look at the H7N9, the Chinese government has struggled a lot in trying to eradicate this virus. By late 2017, the Chinese government launched a nationwide vaccination program. I want folks to also remember that in 2017, we, the United States, reported a different strain of the H7N9 highly pathogenic avian influenza. It was a non-American wild bird lineage, and it was found in chicken broiler breeders. And we, the United States, we fought extremely hard to eradicate that virus. And we took care of it in order to put our production folks back into business. So again, those two serotypes, the China's H7N9 and the American H7N9, they're totally different. So I want folks to realize that. The interesting thing again with this H7N9 is that globally, it has not been seen circulating in a lot of different countries. It is focused specifically in China, and where we've had previous exposures occurring in mainland China. And you look at some of the pictures, this is a live marketing system in China. And you could see where early on, way back in 2013, markets were closed down, they were being disinfected. You can look at the extreme left, that is the vaccination program that is being implemented today in China with this virus. I wanted to share with folks the risk of a virus like that. If you look at the world today in terms of global traveling and flights moving from continents to continents, it is very, very scary when you think about the fact that in 2 hours, or ranging in 2 hours, and you can extend it to 13 hours to Asia, one can have the possibility in moving a virus from one continent to the other. So one complication dealing with H7N9 or any other avian influenza, hypopathogenic avian influenza viruses, is global movement of people. So when you look at this map, we can see where the H7N9, in some cases, were imported from China. In Canada, they had 2, in Hong Kong, 13, in Malaysia, 1, and in Taiwan, 4. When we look at the next serotype, H5N1, you all remember the H5N1 is the progenitor virus for all the different serotypes that we're looking at today. And this started way, way, way back in 1996 in the Guangdong province in China. So when I went back and looked at the update of this serotype, you could see that it keeps circulating. There are 4 countries that are endemic with this virus: Egypt, Indonesia, China, and Vietnam. And ironically, all these 4 countries have implemented vaccination programs. And so up to date, just to correct this number, it's 860 cases as of March the 3rd of this year, resulting into 454 deaths. And this specific serotype has been circulating in 16 countries. In understanding the H5N8, like if all of you remember, this is the virus that eventually came to the United States in 2014 through the wild birds, and then mixed with the North American viruses and created the H5N2 that eventually, the hyperpathogenic H5N2, that eventually was the predominant virus that killed and infected a lot of our poultry in the largest disease outbreak in the United States in 2015. This virus continues to circulate in Europe, Africa, Middle East, and Asia. And now it has also been found in India and Chinese Taipei. It is known that some of all these countries that are listed are located in the migratory route of wild birds, suggesting the likely spread of the virus along that route. This H5N8 has been very, very detrimental to poultry productions all over the world because it caused a lot of high mortality. So a lot of countries have been implementing or enhancing their wild bird surveillance to give them an indication where that virus is. The majority of wild bird migration across Europe, Africa, and Asia usually subsides after the winter season. While we know that wintering location of these wild birds are often stable, additional movement within a region may be affected by local weather conditions, food resources, access to open water, etc. And all that just means that sometimes, so if you look at our experience in 2017, where we had the H7N9 high-party AI in the southeast part of the country, that is Kentucky, Alabama, Tennessee, and Georgia, it was kind of strange. And when you look at it and you look at the flying patterns of the birds, you might feel as if when those birds were migrating, if the geographical or weather situations that dictates for them to stop, whether it's to stop for food resources, then the environment is extremely contaminated for the virus, and then leads to an opportunity for that virus to get into poultry premises. So if you look at this map in front of you, you can see that the H5N8 has caused a lot of destructions since it came up in the scene, and that including us, the United States. Now, let's look at the H5N6. This virus first emerged in China in 2013 and has been reported by 7 Asian countries. I will frankly tell you that in my own personal reading, this is the virus that I'm really scared of to ever come to the United States. We could see that the virus is causing severe clinical signs in poultry and associated mortality. The outbreaks in these countries have led to significant destruction of poultry. We're looking at almost 29 birds destroyed. This group of the H5N6 virus has not been associated with human infection, including a number of birds. A total of 19 laboratory confirmed cases of human infection with H5N6 virus, including 6 that have been reported by the WHO, the World Organization on Animal Health, the World Health Organization, from China since 2014. I will frankly tell you that this virus is extremely causing a lot of havoc in the Republic of Korea. I'm scared of this virus to come to the United States because it is killing people now. And we were fortunate looking at the H5N8 that came in 2014. That virus has not been found causing deaths in human beings. When we look at the H5N2, outbreaks of this serotype, they continue to be reported in Chinese Taipei since 2012. Russia experienced this serotype in 2017. And I remember I was invited to go to Russia to kind of give them an overview of how the United States is handling detections of avian influenza viruses, and to discuss with them our very, very important avian influenza surveillance program. These H5.2N2 viruses, they cause varying levels of pathogenicity in poultry, and they lead to significant losses within the poultry industry. So when we look at the global situation again, we've noticed that the H5 type and not the H7 has been the one that has been circulating a lot and causing a lot of problems all over the world. You could see a list of countries that have detected an H5 type of highly pathogenic avian influenza. A lot of countries. And I make a joke here that my mother country that I grew up and came before coming to the United States as a young student, Cameroon, is included in that list. So you can see no country is protected by avian influenza, especially when you're on flyways. There is a serotype that has just been reported recently for the first time in a human, and that is the H7N4. So in front of you is the Department of Homeland Security spot report of this serotype. Okay, it's extremely new. It was detected in a 68-year-old woman from Jiangsu province in China. This woman was experiencing a pre-existing coronary heart disease and hypertension. She developed respiratory symptoms and was hospitalized for 21 days and then was released in January 2018. She was reportedly that she had contact with live poultry prior to symptoms around December 2017, and she was hospitalized in January 1, 2018, and then she was later discharged. What is interesting here is that when they look at doing the surveillance and the epidemiology, 28 people that came into contact with her did not experience any symptoms. And so by February 2018, the National Health and Family Planning Commission of China notified the World Health Organization of this case. When they look at the genetic sequence of this H7N4, the virus shows that all the virus segments originate from avian influenza viruses. Again, moving from birds to human beings. And my joke has always been, give us money to take care of these viruses in birds, and you will not get them in human beings. Again, this is the first detection of an H7N4 in a human. Now, I'm going to walk you through very quickly on some of the findings that we've experienced in 2018 in the United States. And these are all low pathogenic avian influenza viruses. So the first case was looked upon on March 4, 2018. This was routine pre-slaughter surveillance testing commercial turkey flocks in Jasper County, Missouri. These birds were 17 weeks old and they were about looking at our next slide. This is the second case of an H7N1. Okay, just hold on. Okay, sorry for the technology difficulties there. Looking at our next slide, this case represents an H7N1 low pathogenicity avian influenza detection in the United States in 2018. This was in a commercial broiler breeder flock in Hopkins County, Texas. This birds were 57 weeks old, and the premises consisted of 2 houses. The second house, I think, looking at the history, exhibited a slight increase in mortality between 1 to 1.5% and a decrease in egg production, about 20%. This flock has been depopulated. The disposal has been completed, and cleaning and disinfection has also been completed, which means virus elimination. I think they are right now preparing for restocking. So again, the Texas Animal Health Commission and the United States Department of Agriculture work extremely well together to prevent the spread to other poultry premises. The next slide, and our third case this year, is an H7 low pathogenicity avian influenza detection in a backyard chicken layer flock. This flock was testing for pre-movement of hatching eggs into the state of Iowa. This flock was in Webster County, Missouri. And basically, this flock also had around 23 company flocks, and all tested negative. As of to date, this flock has been depopulated. It was depopulated with carbon dioxide. I think it was about 2,781 specific breeds that basically produce hatching eggs that are moved into hatcheries in Iowa. So again, the Missouri Department of Agriculture and the United States Department of Agriculture worked extremely hard to prevent the spread of this disease. I would like to take this opportunity in the next series of slides to talk about how we do notify or how do we report avian influenza findings to OIE. Again, when you look at the OIE code, the OIE no longer using the term notifiable AI. So if all of you remember way back, we always used to talk about notifiable H5, notifiable H7. They don't use that word anymore. But again, H5 and H7 are still notifiable. And the way they define an infection of AI today is an infection in poultry caused by influenza A viruses with high pathogenicity and by H5 and H7 subtypes of low pathogenicity. So basically what they're saying is the non-H5 and H7 influenzas A, that is, you're looking at H1 through H4, H6, H8, H16, the OIE does not regard that as avian influenza, no more, and they are not notifiable. So H2 means nothing to us, except that H2 is killing birds for the first time. Then the science has to look into that and decide what they do. So again, all H5 and H7 subtypes, regardless of their violence in poultry, are supposed to be reported to the OIE. One thing that I put here in red, because this question comes up all the time. Oh, so what happens when we find avian influenza in wild birds? So basically, we don't report low pathogenicity avian influenza in wild birds. When we find high pathogenicity avian influenza, the OIE wants to know that, but the OIE also says that there should be no restrictions on trade when we find high pathogenicity avian influenza in wild birds. Looking at the frequency of reporting, that question comes up a lot. For high pathogenicity avian influenza, we report any finding anytime immediately upon confirmation, and then emergency reports will follow weekly updates until it's resolved. For low pathogenicity avian influenza, when it occurs in the livestock marketing system and backyard flocks, we report those in 6-month and annual reports, so we don't report those immediately. And then we can report those immediately only to bilateral trading partners that require us to report that. If we find low pathogenicity avian influenza in commercial poultry productions, they're supposed to be reported immediately upon confirmation. But there's one thing they are putting here as a note. A finding of a single serologic finding in commercial poultry that, and we do further epidemiological investigation, especially in the 10-kilometer radius, and we do not find additional serologic positive, or we don't find a virus or antigen, that is not reportable. That case is closed. So how do we report avian influenza in the United States? I want folks and everybody to understand that today, since 2006, or let me say 2004, when the rule went out as an interim rule, avian influenza H5H7 is a reportable disease in the United States. So all licensed veterinarians in the United States have to report this finding to their state and their federal government. Any suspect case must be reported immediately to the state veterinarian or the AP's veterinary services district director or assistant director. Producers, veterinarians, animal health technicians, slaughter inspectors, laboratory diagnosticians, or any person with knowledge of the disease must report that immediately. If it's a suspect or confirmed cases, you got to report that to the state or the federal government. So how do we report AI to trading partners? We try to notify the OIE, and then the OIE will notify all other 180 members within 24 to 48 hours. But we do have individual trading partners that, again, like I mentioned before, based on agreements we have with them, we have to report to them immediately. Those will include countries like Japan, Hong Kong, and Singapore as an example. With most LPAI restrictions today, most countries have negotiated with us where we limit trade to the affected county or the 10-kilometer radius that immediately surrounds the infected premises. This has been ongoing discussions with our trading partners to reduce the area that they prevent trade from. From hyperpathogenic avian influenza, we expect majority of countries to impose restrictions at the state level. For example, Japan does that with us. At the county level, the EU kind of works with us on that, and we continue to work to reduce those geographical boundaries. We still have countries like China that, again, restrict the entire United States. I think, again, on this slide, I put Korea here. I think we just had an agreement with Korea where Korea is going to now restrict us to the state level. So that is a great success. And I want to thank my folks in Iowa to have participated in an audit that the Korean government came here to look at our poultry system and how we respond to avian influenza. For any updates that you need to know and detailed information for products under the FSIS certification for meat products, and egg products, you can use this website, this URL, to go in there and see all the different restrictions on each country. So we cannot provide that for each country because we're going to be writing for almost 180 member countries. So you can go to this website and you can see exactly all the details of the restrictions. I also wanted in this presentation to provide an update of our avian influenza program in the United States, what is going on, so my stakeholders can understand all the hard work that they're doing to support our large poultry industry and the largest in the world. So the first good news for us is that on March 23rd this year, Hawaii has officially joined the National Poultry Improvement Plan. So we always used to say 49 states and 1 territory participating in NPIP. Now we finally have Hawaii participating in the National Poultry Improvement Plan. So all 50 states of America and 1 territory, and that's Puerto Rico, are voluntary participants of the NPIP. So basically, I put a contact information here for anyone who would like to talk to the Hawaiian contact representative. Is Dr. Raquel Wong, and works with the Hawaiian Department of Agriculture. So hooray, Hawaii is now an NPIP participant. The NPIP is going to be having its 44th NPIP biannual conference. The booklets have gone out for the proposed changes. Please feel free to go ahead and begin reviewing and discussing this proposal with your state representative. That meeting is going to be at the Franklin Marriott Cold Springs Hotel in Tennessee. The meeting date again is June 26 through 28. I just put this website here for folks to realize that we have a beautiful website, the NPIP website, that you can go in and all updated information and everything about the regulation, participants, NPIP participants, basically the information about the biannual conference. Again, you can, this date has been corrected, it's 2018. So you can go to this website and obtain a lot of information about the NPIP. This update that you see me put on this slide is trying to get folks to understand the definition of a backyard flock in the United States. In the United States, what we call a backyard flock is so different from what other folks might think of what a backyard flock is. And this is, again, under our H5 and H7 low pathogenicity avian influenza program. So, for example, this definition here does not include pet birds. So pet birds, they're not included in the definition of poultry. So if we find AI in a pet bird, we don't report that. We don't tell anybody about that. This definition also does not include commercial breeder birds because their numbers might be less for what you're going to be seeing on this slide. So all we're saying in the United States for the participants for the avian influenza program, if you are a table-led facility that you're less than 75,000 birds per flock, you are a backyard premises. For meat-type chickens, the slaughter plants must be slaughtering fewer than 200,000 birds per week. For meat-type turkeys, they must slaughter fewer than 2 million birds per year. For commercial waterfowl, upland game birds, slaughtering from, they must be doing that. They must be slaughtering less than 50,000 birds. And for raised for release birds, releasing fewer than 25 birds per year. So this is a definition of the backyard flock. Anytime that you have an incident or case in your state, just make sure you talk with us, USDA, and we can help you in terms of classifying whether it's backyard or commercial. That is extremely, extremely important. Another update that I want to present to the stakeholders is we just had a meeting on March 27 in Atlanta, Georgia. This meeting was to discuss about the proposed policy that USDA has for indemnity, compensation, and control marketing. And in coming up with that proposed policy, we had looked at all the historical challenges, basically in dealing with every time that we have an avian influenza incident, how do we deal with indemnity, compensation, and control marketing. That information is going to be going out to all stakeholders to look at that proposed policy. You are free to provide your comments and then be ready to discuss this at the NPIP biannual conference in June. At this meeting again also, we had an opportunity to discuss on how do we control low pathogenicity avian influenza in a large layer operation. I put that on that agenda because we have not, as a country, as an industry, really tackled this. The last time that we dealt with vaccinating a flock for low pathogenic avian influenza, and this was in Connecticut, was in 2003. We have not truly had a low path event in a large layer operation. So we wanted to discuss this. I had an opportunity to invite UEP president to come talk about this and have the opportunity for all participants to listen and provide their input. I think from this, a working group is going to be formed to discuss and come up with suggestions and solutions in dealing with this before we have our first incident. Another group that we've not talked a lot about is dealing with HPAI in an upland game bird premises. Again, one thing we've talked about this, and I think there's some proposed changes that are going to be put forward for this industry, is to try to separate the folks who truly raise birds for release and the folks who are raising birds for meat consumption or egg consumption. Because it's extremely important that we separate those two. because the way we're looking at it is for those folks that are raising birds specifically for release, that are, whether it's a hunting preserve or they're sending it to a hunting preserve, if that type of a premises is tested positive, those are wildlife, and those are captive wildlife. So we're not going to report those immediately. We're going to be reporting those at the annual wildlife disease report at the end of the year. So what are some take-home messages from this global update of avian influenza? We've seen that the Northern Hemisphere winter season is typically associated with an increased risk of avian influenza. Again, that might be because of the wild bird flying patterns. We also can see that in 2017 to 2018, there has been a new and reoccurring outbreaks of hyperpathogenic avian influenza, specifically the H5N8 and the H5N6 in Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. However, the new outbreaks in poultry in countries like Iraq, Japan, Republic of Korea, and Saudi Arabia basically indicate to us that the geographical distribution of these subtypes are still increasing, and the veterinary authorities must continue to respond to this risk to prevent the spread to other countries. We know very well that these zoonotic avian influenza viruses that have been detected in China, specifically the H7N9 and the H7N6, and part of Africa and Asia, the H5N1, these two pose a very significant public health risk. All veterinary authorities anywhere in the world, we all still struggle to control the situation. And because of that, that gives the opportunity for these viruses to continue to circulate in poultry population, and they can pose tremendous public health situation. So we can see that although there are seasonal trends, the risk is year-round since the viruses become established and they're self-sustaining in wild bird population. So we're seeing that we're getting different outbreaks at different times of the year because of that. We can also see that the role of commercial farm poultry, backyard poultry, live bird marketing system, and wild birds of different species in maintaining this virus is extremely, extremely important. And we have to continue to study, do a lot of epidemiological studies to try to understand how to mitigate this. There is no science evidence that supports that when you go kill wild birds or free-racing birds, you're going to control avian influenza. So please do not encourage people to think that they can go kill wild birds to control this disease. We also know that detections of avian influenza, including hyperpathogenic avian influenza in wild birds alone, do not result in a country losing its status as free from hyperpathogenic avian influenza. So there is no justification for imposing restrictions on trade on poultry and poultry products for such countries. So to conclude, this is what I would say. In the United States, surveillance of avian influenza viruses is ongoing. We have a robust system. We do surveillance in our commercial poultry populations, the live bird marketing system, backyard poultry, and migratory wild bird population. Our avian influenza program helps us to make sure that we can declare freedom of this disease in our commercial poultry population. We do both active surveillance, where we go out and survey birds at specific time and requires collecting specific samples. This also provides us some transparency when we continue this program to make sure that we can document that we have disease-free flocks in the United States. I believe that our avian influenza program in the United States is one of the strongest in the world, and it allows us to early detect and prevent the spread of disease. And the basic ultimate goal, again, is protecting human health and animal health. So with that, I want to thank my colleagues in our avian health team with USDA Department of Agriculture, basically Dr. Denise Brinson, who is the NPIP coordinator, Dr. Patricia Fox, who is our avian health epidemiologist, the National Epidemiology Officer, and then Dr. Kristen Lindsay, with an avian health coordinator with the NPIP. I would like to stop there for any questions for me. If not, thanks again for the opportunity to present on the global update on avian influenza. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Doctor. And I want to thank everyone in advance for watching this webinar with us. We do have another upcoming webinar, which will be April 23rd at 11 a.m. And they will be presenting non-layer syndrome, respiratory and gastrointestinal diseases. If you can join us, please let us know. Once again, thank you, Doctor. And we look forward to having everyone at our next webinar.